When a group of arrogant black belts at Griffin's dojo noticed Claire, a quiet single mom training alone, they saw an easy target for their petty taunts and dismissive sneers. What they didn't know was that Claire carried a past few could imagine, and her calm resilience masked a legacy far beyond their understanding. What began as a public humiliation quickly spiraled into a moment that would shake the gym to its core. Unbeknownst to them, Claire's son, long retired from the cage but still the most feared MMA champion alive, was about to arrive. In a matter of minutes, their arrogance would be shattered, their disrespect answered not with rage, but with a powerful reminder that strength isn't always loud, and respect must be earned, never taken for granted. Just a quick little pause before I forget. If you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, please leave a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump back in. The late afternoon light slanted through the tall glass windows of Griffin's dojo, casting long stripes across the polished mats. The faint smell of sweat and disinfectant hung in the air, mixed with the low hum of voices from a group of black belts lounging near the far wall. Their laughter was sharp, quick, the kind that made you instinctively check if it was about you. Claire Dawson, 38, stepped inside quietly. Her worn gym bag hung from one shoulder, and her hair was tied back with the kind of careless efficiency of someone who had no time for vanity. She wore a plain gray t-shirt, black training leggings, and old running shoes that had clearly seen better days. There was nothing remarkable about her, at least not to the casual eye. She approached the front desk with a small, polite smile. "I'm here to sign up for the beginner self-defense class," she said softly to the young receptionist, Mia, who glanced up from her tablet. Before Mia could respond, a voice from across the mats called out, "Hey, new girl, you sure you're in the right place? This isn't yoga." The remark came from Darren Cole, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 30s, wearing a crisp black GI with a red-striped belt. His two friends, also black belts, chuckled from their spot against the wall. Claire's smile didn't falter, though her eyes shifted slightly in Darren's direction. "I'm in the right place," she replied evenly, turning back to the desk. Her tone wasn't defensive, it was calm, almost disarmingly so. But Darren wasn't done. "You know these classes get rough," he said, walking over. "Wouldn't want you pulling something." Claire didn't respond right away. She simply set her gym bag down beside her feet, her hands resting lightly on the counter. Something about the way she stood, weight balanced, shoulders relaxed, eyes quietly attentive, made Evan, one of the younger students watching from a corner, glance up from tying his belt. He couldn't place it, but there was something deliberate about her stillness. From the corner of the mat, Darren's friend smirked, clearly enjoying the show. "Maybe she's here to watch her boyfriend," one of them said. Claire's expression didn't change. If the word stung, she didn't show it. "No," she said simply. "I'm here to learn." Her voice was low, steady, the kind that didn't need to be raised to carry weight. But if anyone noticed that, they didn't say so. Not yet. Darren folded his arms, the faintest smirk tugging at his mouth. "All right then, new girl. Let's see what you've got." He gestured toward the mats, as if inviting her into a game only he knew the rules to. Claire hesitated, not from fear, but from a quiet calculation, eyes moving briefly over the layout of the dojo, the exit, the spacing between bodies. She stepped forward, barefoot now, her old sneakers neatly tucked beside her bag. The class was already winding down from a sparring drill. Sweat glistened on foreheads, belts hung loose, laughter filled the air. But Darren's voice carried above the noise. "This here's the advanced side," he said, motioning to the black mats. "You sure you're ready to hang with the real fighters?" A ripple of attention spread through the room. Students stopped stretching. A couple of them, Maya, a brown belt in her late 20s, and Evan, exchanged a quick glance. It wasn't unheard of for Darren to tease newcomers, but today, something about the way he did it felt sharper. "I'm here for the beginner class," Claire repeated evenly, her eyes not meeting his, but also not avoiding them. "I'll start where I'm supposed to." Her refusal to rise to the bait only seemed to irritate him. He stepped closer, close enough that his shadow crossed her face. "See, that's the thing. Beginners can't handle real pressure. But we could give you a quick demo. Help you decide." A couple of his friends chuckled from the wall. Someone muttered, "This'll be quick." Claire's gaze flicked briefly to Darren's stance. Weight uneven, hands loose but slightly forward, then back to his eyes. Her face was unreadable, but her fingers brushed the hem of her t-shirt in a way that could have been idle habit or something else. Evan noticed it. He didn't know why, but it reminded him of watching his uncle before a fight. That moment where stillness wasn't an action, but readiness. He looked at her feet, at the way her toes spread lightly against the mat, gripping for balance. She didn't look scared. She looked measured. "Maybe she just doesn't want to get hurt," Darren said loudly. That was when Claire finally met his gaze directly. Not with challenge, not with fear, but with a level, steady calm that made Darren's words falter for half a second. A pause, barely a breath, but enough for the room to notice. The air in Griffin's dojo shifted almost imperceptibly. A few chuckles from the wall died down, replaced by the squeak of bare feet adjusting on the mat and the faint hiss of the air conditioner overhead. Claire didn't step back. She didn't answer right away. She simply stood there, spine straight, chin level, as if she had all the time in the world. Her breathing was slow and even, her gaze steady but without any trace of aggression. "Look," Darren said, a forced brightness in his tone now. "Nobody's here to hurt you. It's just a little fun." His friends snickered again, but softer this time, as if unsure whether the moment was still as funny as it had been 2 minutes ago. Claire finally spoke, her voice measured. "I came here to learn. If that's what happens here, then I'll stay. If not," she glanced toward the door, then back at Darren, "I'll find somewhere else." It was not a threat. It was simply a fact, delivered without heat or defense. But the precision of her words, the lack of wasted syllables, made Maya lower her crossed arms and tilt her head, watching. Evan noticed something else. The faintest white line ran across Claire's right forearm, half hidden by her sleeve. It wasn't the kind of scar you got from bumping into furniture, more like the clean, shallow line of a blade. Claire adjusted the strap of her sports bra under the t-shirt, and in that second, the fabric pulled just enough to reveal another small mark, round, pale, on her shoulder. A healed bullet graze, if Evan was any judge. His uncle had one almost identical. She caught him looking. For the briefest second, there was the ghost of a smile, not mocking, not warm, just knowing. "Beginner class is over there," Mia said quickly from the desk, trying to cut the tension, motioning toward the far side of the room. Claire nodded once, a small, efficient gesture, and moved in that direction without looking back at Darren. Her walk was unhurried, each step grounded and deliberate. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Darren didn't have a comeback ready. Maya's eyes followed her. Something about the way that woman moved, not like she was avoiding a fight, but like she'd already survived a dozen worse, left her with an odd knot in her chest. Something told her, this wasn't a beginner. Claire stepped onto the beginner side of the mats, kneeling at the edge out of habit, not the bowing posture the dojo taught, but a short, respectful pause, her palms resting lightly on her thighs. A few of the new students glanced at her, curious. They didn't know her, but something about that stillness didn't feel like someone just figuring things out. The instructor for the beginner group, Tom Varela, a patient man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a navy blue GI, offered a polite nod. "You're new. Welcome. We keep it simple here," he said warmly. Claire returned the nod. Simple works. As Tom demonstrated a basic wrist escape to the group, Claire knelt at the back, watching intently. She didn't fidget, didn't glance around. She studied every detail, her gaze tracking the instructor's foot placement, the subtle turn of his hips. Then, and only when he was done, she joined the line. Her movements were controlled, economy in motion, no wasted energy. She tried the technique once, twice, never asking questions, but clearly absorbing everything. Across the room, Darren and his two friends watched in between stretches. "See? Already struggling," one muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. As Claire worked with her partner, Anita, a shy 19-year-old with a green belt, something shifted. The first time Anita tried to grab her wrist, Claire's reaction was slow, deliberate, clearly playing the role of a beginner. The second time, her hand moved a fraction earlier, the turn of her body precise, the release clean. Not flashy, not forceful, just right. Anita blinked, surprised. "Have you done this before?" she asked quietly. Claire smiled faintly. "Something like it. Her tone made it clear there'd be no follow-up. For a moment, her gaze drifted, not to Darren, but to the far corner of the dojo, where a framed photograph hung on the wall. It was of the late Master Harlan Griffin, founder of the dojo, shaking hands with a man in fatigues decades ago. Claire's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, and her thumb grazed the inside of her left wrist, where, hidden beneath the elastic band of her sports watch, a small dog tag lay tucked away. She closed her eyes briefly. In that moment, the noise of the dojo fell away. The laughter, the shuffling, the muffled thud of sparring pairs, all replaced by a memory she didn't call for but couldn't push away. A face, a voice, a promise she hadn't yet broken. From the corner, Maya sipped from her water bottle, eyes locked on the beginner group. She'd seen plenty of new students come through Griffin's dojo, the nervous ones who flinched at every grab, the overeager ones who moved too fast and sloppy. But Claire didn't fit either. She moved like someone who knew exactly how much she could give without showing her hand. Maya's gaze slid toward Darren, who was still stretching with his buddies, chuckling under his breath. He was watching Claire, too, though his smirk had faded into something more focused. "You gonna make her tap later?" one of his friends asked. Darren gave a half shrug. "Maybe I'll teach her a lesson before she gets herself hurt." But Maya caught the pause before he said it, as if he were trying to convince himself that Claire was just another rookie. On the mats, Anita fumbled with the wrist grip again, and Claire murmured something too low for anyone else to hear. Anita tried the move, and this time it flowed better, cleaner. She smiled, surprised at herself. Claire gave a small nod of approval and stepped back, letting Anita take the credit in front of the instructor. Evan, kneeling nearby, watched this quietly. He'd noticed her stance earlier. Now he noticed something else, the way she scanned the room between reps, eyes flicking to the exits, the mirrors, the corners. Not darting nervously, cataloging. He recognized the habit because his cousin, a police officer, did the same thing. When Tom clapped his hands to switch partners, Claire moved without hesitation, choosing a spot that gave her a clear line of sight to both the door and Darren's group. She did it casually, as though it were pure coincidence. Evan caught Maya's eye, tilting his chin toward Claire. "You see it?" he whispered. Maya frowned. "See what? I don't know. She's not moving like a beginner." "Not exactly." Maya didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on Claire, who was calmly adjusting her partner's foot placement, voice low but confident. There was no need for show, no need to prove anything. But there was something layered beneath the surface. Across the room, Darren's voice cut through again. "Hey, new girl. Let's see if you can keep that composure when someone's actually coming at you." Claire didn't turn, didn't respond. But Maya's stomach tightened. Something told her Darren was about to find out more than he wanted. The chatter in Griffin's dojo shifted from easy background noise to something thinner, more fragmented. People were still talking, but their eyes kept drifting toward the beginner mat. Toward Claire. Tom clapped again for a break, the slap of his palms echoing across the polished floor. Students shuffled to water coolers or grabbed towels. Claire simply stepped off the mat, rolled her shoulders once, and crouched by her bag to take a slow sip from her water bottle. It was an unremarkable action, yet somehow deliberate, like every motion had been planned 2 beats ahead. By the heavy bag in the corner, Luke Hernandez, a wiry 20-year-old yellow belt, leaned toward his friend. "Who is she? I swear I've seen her before." His friend shrugged. "Maybe she trained somewhere else." "Nah," Luke murmured. "It's not that. It's the way she looks at people. Like she's..." He trailed off, glancing as Claire stood again, stretching her arms overhead in an easy, balanced motion. "Like she's measuring M." Maya moved closer to Evan during the break. "She's got scars," Maya said under her breath. Evan nodded. "Saw him. Forearm, shoulder. Military maybe. Or law enforcement." Maya's tone was speculative, but not casual. Either way, not your average single mom taking a self-defense class. Across the mat, Darren caught her looking. "What?" he called out, grinning. "You thinking she's going to give me a run for my money?" Maya didn't answer, just sipped from her water bottle. Darren took that as a challenge. He stepped toward Claire, his GI swishing faintly with each measured stride. "Come on, beginner. Let's warm you up with something fun. Little friendly roll." Claire glanced at him, expression unreadable. Then she set her water down slowly, as though weighing the request. "This is a beginner class," she said evenly. "Sure," Darren replied. Consider it an accelerated lesson. From the benches, Mia's brow furrowed. She glanced at Tom, who was drying his hands on a towel and watching with quiet interest. A couple of students exchanged uneasy looks. Nobody spoke up, but the energy in the room had changed. It was no longer teasing. It was something more pointed. Claire didn't move toward him, didn't flinch. She just looked at him, a steady, unblinking gaze, until Darren's grin shifted into something tighter. That was the first time he looked even slightly unsure. Claire's eyes held Darren's for a beat too long, not in defiance, but with a kind of steady patience that seemed to unnerve him more than a challenge would have. Then she looked away, stepping back toward the beginner group without another word. Tom resumed demonstrating techniques, but the room's attention wasn't really on him anymore. A few students mirrored his moves, though their eyes kept drifting toward Claire, drawn in by something they couldn't name. While Anita practiced a shoulder lock, Claire adjusted her stance and let the younger woman work through the movement. She gave clear, concise corrections, her voice low, almost soothing. Not too tight. Let them think they have control first, then shift. The words hung oddly in the air. Anita nodded, though she didn't seem to understand the weight behind them. Evan noticed her hands again, steady, no tremor, no wasted motion. There was a discipline there, and something else he couldn't quite put his finger on. When Anita stepped away for water, Claire took a small breath, her gaze drifting to the wall where a row of framed photographs hung. One in particular, a group of men and women in desert fatigues, squinting in harsh sunlight, caught her eye. Her jaw tightened. In her bag, zipped in a side pocket, was a folded photograph. The edges were worn soft from years of being taken out, looked at, and put back. A younger Claire stood in that picture, wearing the same faint half-smile she carried now, her arm around a man in a tan uniform. Behind them, an airfield stretched under a burning sky. The memory rose uninvited. The deafening whir of rotor blades, the acrid sting of dust and fuel, the weight of a final embrace that was meant to last a week but had to last forever. She closed her eyes briefly, grounding herself in the present. This wasn't that place. This wasn't that day. Partner switch. Tom's voice pulled her back. She straightened, giving no sign of what had just passed behind her eyes. From the far side of the mats, Darren called again, louder this time. Come on, new girl, you've been dodging me all class. His tone was still playful, but there was a faint edge now, the kind that made people watch more closely. Maya crossed her arms. She didn't know Claire's story, but she was starting to realize something. Darren had no idea what kind of ground he was standing on. The clatter of practice weapons in the far corner, the muted thump of pads being struck, the low hum of conversation, all of it blurred into background static for Claire. The only thing sharp in her awareness was Darren's voice, cutting across the room in those little bursts. She kept her posture loose, casual, as she stepped into a new pairing. Her partner, a tall teenager named Zach, reached for her wrist clumsily. She let him find the grip, then redirected it with quiet efficiency, guiding him through the release. Zach grinned. Wow, you make it look easy. Claire just said, it's not, and gestured for him to try again. Her eyes drifted, not to Darren this time, but to a scuffed spot on the mat just to the right of him. Her breathing slowed. The room seemed brighter for a second, and she wasn't here anymore. She was kneeling in the dust, helmet off, her hands braced against her thighs. A boy, no older than Zach, lay in front of her, his breathing shallow. Somewhere in the distance, gunfire cracked in uneven rhythm. She heard someone shout her name, not Claire, but a different one she hadn't used in years. Hey, Zach's voice brought her back. She realized she'd been holding his wrist longer than needed. She released him at once, smoothing her expression into calm. Your turn. From the benches, Evan caught it. That tiny slip, that fraction of a second where her eyes had gone somewhere far away. He didn't know where, but it hadn't been a good place. Maya was watching too. She noticed the way Claire reset her stance, exhaled, and seemed to pack whatever she'd been feeling back into some internal vault. On the advanced side, Darren slapped the mat twice, a sharp pop that made a couple of beginners glance over. Anytime you're ready, beginner, he called, drawing out the last word. Claire straightened slowly. She didn't answer, but she didn't turn away either. Maya muttered under her breath, he's fishing in the wrong waters. Darren smiled like he'd already won something. But a few people in the room were starting to see it differently. They weren't sure what Darren was up against. They just knew it wasn't going to be the easy win he thought. Tom's voice rose over the hum of the room, calling for everyone to reset for the final drill of the hour. Claire returned to her spot at the back of the beginner group, kneeling with quiet composure. But the attention of half the dojo, advanced students included, was still drawn toward her like iron filings to a magnet. Maya stepped off the mat to grab her towel, and, without really meaning to, found herself near the front desk where Mia was idly scrolling through her tablet. "Hey," Maya said in a low voice. "You signed her in earlier?" Mia glanced up. "Yeah, Claire Dawson." "What?" Maya shrugged, but her brow stayed furrowed. "Just something about her." Evan joined them, keeping his voice low. "I think I've heard that name before. Not sure where. Could have been an article or... I don't know." He shook his head. "But she's not just some random walk-in." On the mat, Darren was stretching his shoulders, keeping his eyes fixed on her. "End of class, we roll," he announced loudly, as if the decision were already made. Claire looked over at him, and something in her gaze made the noise in the dojo fade for just a second. She didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't even frown, but her stillness was an answer in itself. Maya's eyes narrowed. She'd seen that kind of composure before, years ago, when she'd attended a memorial service for a local veteran. The widow had stood at the podium, voice steady, every word balanced like it had been weighed before leaving her mouth. Claire had that same gravity. Tom, busy putting away pads, happened to glance toward Claire and froze for just half a breath. His eyes narrowed as though he were trying to place her. Then he looked down, continuing his work as if nothing had happened. Claire adjusted her sports watch again. For a fraction of a second, the strap shifted, revealing the glint of a small, worn dog tag. Maya saw it. Evan saw it. Neither said anything, but their eyes met. Darren, oblivious, rolled his neck like a man warming up for an easy match. "Don't worry," he said loud enough for the room to hear. "I'll take it easy on you." Claire slid the strap of her watch back in place and replied, almost too softly to catch. "I hope you do." It wasn't a threat, but in the silence that followed, it didn't sound like mercy either. The class began winding down, pairs breaking apart, students grabbing towels or slipping sandals back on. Claire was wiping her hands on the edge of her shirt when Darren stepped into her space. Not too close, but close enough that the line between friendly and provoking blurred. "Beginner session's over," he said, voice carrying easily across the mats. "Let's roll. 2 minutes. You'll learn more from that than a month of wrist escapes." Several students glanced up from their water bottles. Even Tom paused mid-step, though he didn't intervene. Claire met Darren's gaze. Her breathing stayed even, her posture loose, but there was something measured in the way she stood, like she'd just decided something. "When we're done," she said, her voice low but clear, "you'll apologize." The room stilled just enough that her words seemed to settle in the air. Darren gave a short laugh. "Apologize? For what?" "For underestimating people you don't know." It wasn't a challenge, and it wasn't boastful, but the absolute certainty in her tone left no room for banter. From the sidelines, Evan's eyes widened. Maya shifted her stance, her arms still crossed, but her weight leaning slightly forward. A few of the other students whispered to each other, that edge of curiosity sharpening into anticipation. Darren smirked like he'd heard this before. "You're on. Try not to take it personally when you're on the mat in 30 seconds. Claire didn't answer. She set her gym bag neatly against the wall, slipping her watch inside with the same care someone might place a fragile keepsake. The motion was small, unremarkable to most, but to Maya and Evan, it felt like a signal. She walked toward the advanced mat. Darren was already loosening his shoulders, grinning for his friends. The air between them seemed to change, narrowing until the whole room was tuned to that space. Tom quietly stepped closer to the edge of the mat, arms folded. He didn't say a word, but his eyes didn't leave Claire. Mia, still at the front desk, found herself holding her breath without realizing it. It wasn't just that Darren had picked a fight. It was that Claire had accepted, and somehow, that felt like the bigger event. The dojo, usually alive with the rhythmic thuds of punches and the murmur of friendly banter, now felt charged, like a held breath waiting to be released. As Darren and Claire stepped onto the advanced mat, the room seemed to shrink around them. Every eye followed, every movement amplified in the stillness. Darren adjusted the sleeves of his crisp black GI, the fabric whispering softly against his forearms. He cracked his knuckles, the sharp pop echoing louder than expected, slicing through the tension. His grin was there, but it lacked the easy confidence it had held before. Now it was tighter, less certain, a mask holding back something just beneath the surface. His two friends retreated to the benches, their usual smirks replaced by exchanged glances that betrayed a quiet unease. The swagger that had defined them earlier seemed to dissolve in this moment of reckoning. Claire faced him with a calm unlike anything Darren had seen today. Barefoot on the cool mat, she stood with a natural grace, feet planted firmly but relaxed, weight balanced evenly. Her hands hung loose at her sides, fingers gently curved but never tensed into fists. There was no flourish, no show, just presence. From the sidelines, Evan's breath hitched slightly, his eyes fixed on her steady posture. Beside him, Maya folded her arms, her gaze sharpening, absorbing every detail. She felt the shift deep in her chest, that unmistakable prelude to something significant, something that would change the story they thought they knew. The harsh overhead lights cast a soft sheen on Darren's brow, droplets of sweat glistening like tiny beads of doubt. Claire's gaze flicked away for a moment, toward the doorway, before snapping back to lock with Darren's. There was no hesitation, no falter in her expression, only absolute presence. Tom stood just off the mat, arms folded, watching with a quiet intensity. His voice, when it came, was a whisper but carried weight. Remember, control. His eyes stayed on Claire longer than on Darren, as if he could see beyond the surface into the storm beneath her stillness. A hush fell over the dojo, thick and heavy, pressing against the walls. Even the usual hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade, swallowed by the silence that gripped every soul present. Time slowed, each heartbeat echoing loudly in the stillness. Claire shifted her weight, the subtle grounding movement barely noticeable but precise. A silent affirmation to herself, a gathering of calm strength. No words, no bravado, just an unspoken readiness. Darren's jaw tightened. His grin slipped into a hard line. Ready? His voice was low, almost a challenge. Claire's answer was measured, simple. Yes. No flourish, no flash, just the quiet confidence of someone who has nothing to prove. The dojo seemed to lean in, holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The atmosphere inside Griffin's dojo shifted once again, as if the very air had thickened. The usual sounds of movement, footsteps, soft thuds of strikes on pads, the occasional quiet laughter, had all but faded. Now, only the faintest echoes remained, as if the room itself were holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. Claire stood at the edge of the advanced mat, her feet bare against the cool vinyl surface. Her posture was relaxed but deliberate, a perfect balance of readiness and calm. Evan's eyes caught every subtle motion, the slight tilt of her head as she scanned the room, the way her shoulders settled back as if releasing a long-held tension. She breathed slowly, deliberately, grounding herself in the moment. Beneath that calm exterior, there was a quiet power that felt as though it had been forged over countless battles, both seen and unseen. Darren mirrored her stance across the mat, his GI rustling faintly with the shift of his weight. But his earlier bravado had softened into something more measured. His jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, uncertainty flickered behind his eyes. He glanced toward his friends seated at the side, their smiles gone, replaced by an uneasy silence. The easy confidence of before was now replaced with a focused tension. They were all watching, waiting for what neither of them dared to speak aloud. Around the room, the students and onlookers instinctively took a step back, forming a loose circle that felt more like a boundary, a silent acknowledgement that what was about to happen was more than just another sparring match. Maya folded her arms and fixed her gaze on Claire, noticing the subtle way Claire's body adjusted, dropping her weight slightly, finding an unshakable center in the midst of the pressure. Tom, the instructor, moved just a little closer, his fingers tightening around the edge of a training pad resting against his thigh. His eyes flicked briefly toward Claire's left wrist, where the worn edges of a dog tag peeked out from beneath her sleeve. The dog tag was more than a token. It was a symbol, a fragment of a past life layered beneath her quiet exterior. Claire's eyes briefly darted to the entrance, and in that fleeting moment, something passed over her face, a flash of loss, a hint of a story she carried silently. Then, just as quickly, her features settled into composed resolve. She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs and grounding herself, as if drawing strength from the very air around her. The space between her and Darren seemed to shrink, the distance charged with electric tension. Darren exhaled sharply, his hands rising in a gesture that was at once defensive and provocative. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, voice low and edged with something that wasn't quite bravado anymore. Claire answered not with words, but a simple, deliberate nod, a quiet acceptance, a calm before the storm that had yet to break. The dojo fell into absolute silence. No one shifted. No one spoke. The world seemed to contract into that moment, each heartbeat echoing in the stillness as time stretched, hanging on the precipice of what was to come. The silence held, heavy and expectant, as the minutes seemed to stretch like shadows at dusk. Claire stood motionless on the mat, her breathing steady and measured, each inhale and exhale a quiet drumbeat of resolve. Her eyes, sharp and clear, never wavered from Darren's figure across the room. Evan shifted slightly on the bench, sensing the invisible thread that connected every person in the dojo to this singular moment. Maya's hands clenched briefly at her sides, not in fear, but in anticipation. Claire's muscles were loose, but every fiber of her being hummed with readiness. Her fingers curled gently, the same subtle movement she had made moments ago, like a calm before a storm. Around her wrist, the dog tag was hidden once more beneath her sleeve, a symbol of battles far removed from this quiet gym, but no less present. Darren's stance tightened. His eyes flicked toward his friends before returning to Claire. He tried to summon the bravado that had carried him this far, but it felt brittle, like a thin shell ready to crack. His breath came a little faster now, betraying nerves beneath the surface. The other students stood back, forming a protective circle that framed the two combatants. Whispers had faded into near silence. The collective focus was absolute. Tom's steady gaze never left Claire, his lips pressed into a thin line, as if watching not just a match, but something far more consequential. Claire shifted her weight slightly, a barely perceptible motion that seemed to command the space around her. It was a movement born of years of discipline, not just physical, but emotional, mental. She was not here to prove strength or win a fight. She was here to reclaim dignity. A bead of sweat traced down Darren's temple. He swallowed hard, his hands lowering slightly, an unspoken admission that this would not be the easy victory he had expected. Suddenly, from the gym's entrance, the door swung open with a soft creak. A figure stepped in, tall, composed, eyes sharp as a hawk's. The room shifted again, the tension thickening, but now tinged with a new, undeniable energy. The newcomer's gaze locked on Claire for a heartbeat before flicking to Darren, and in that instant, something unspoken passed between them. The room fell deeper into silence, every breath held, every muscle taut. The storm was gathering, and no one in Griffin's dojo would soon forget what happened next. The quiet thud of the dojo door closing behind the newcomer sounded louder than expected, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The room's energy shifted instantly, subtle but undeniable, like a ripple expanding outward from a stone dropped into still water. Standing in the doorway was a man in his late 20s, tall and lean, dressed simply in worn jeans and a dark shirt. His posture was relaxed but carried an unshakable air of authority. Every movement was deliberate, a dance of calm precision. His eyes swept across the room, sharp and steady, landing first on Darren, whose confident smirk faltered the instant their gazes locked, before settling on Claire. Claire remained poised, but there was a faint tightening around her eyes, a flicker of relief buried beneath her stoicism. The newcomer's presence seemed to breathe strength into her, as if an unspoken bond of trust tethered them invisibly. Evan's chest tightened. Maya's arms crossed more firmly. Neither spoke, but both felt the atmosphere thicken. The tension that had been building now sharpened into something palpable. Tom, standing just off the mat, caught the shift instantly. His gaze tracked the newcomer's steady approach and then flicked back to Claire, his expression a mixture of respect and quiet awe. His voice, low and almost lost beneath the murmur of the room, whispered to no one in particular, "He's the one." Darren's confident posture crumbled. His shoulders stiffened, and the easy bravado drained from his face, replaced by a tension that radiated like a warning flare. The space around him seemed to shrink, his circle of friends drifting uncomfortably closer. The newcomer moved with purpose, closing the distance with a grace that was both commanding and understated. His presence altered the room's entire dynamic. The invisible balance of power shifted, tipping decisively. Claire's stance adjusted subtly, feet planted wider, a grounding rooted not just in physical strength, but in decades of experience. The dog tag beneath her sleeve caught the light, a silent testament to a life shaped by trials and sacrifice. Their eyes met briefly, an exchange heavy with history, unspoken words, and quiet reassurance. The crowd held its breath, sensing the moment was no longer just about a sparring match. It was about something far deeper. The storm poised at the edges of the room was no longer a distant threat. It had arrived. The tension in Griffin's dojo hung suspended, electric and taut, as Darren's eyes narrowed, muscles coiling in readiness. He lunged forward, but before his fist could fully extend, the newcomer moved with a fluidity that spoke of countless hours of practiced control. His step was deliberate, precise, never rushed, never wasted. The room seemed to slow, each breath held tight, as if the air itself awaited what would come. Without a hint of aggression, the newcomer's hands intercepted Darren's strike. His grip was firm yet controlled, guiding Darren's arm down and away with the ease of a master teaching a novice. The move wasn't about brute force or spectacle. It was discipline, efficiency, and undeniable command. Darren stumbled slightly, off balance and disarmed, his bravado crumbling beneath the weight of that quiet strength. A collective intake of breath swept through the dojo. The sudden shift in power left no room for misunderstanding. This was not a challenge to be met with bluster or resistance. It was a precise assertion of authority that silenced the room and demanded respect. Claire watched from her corner with calm resolve, her posture unwavering. The presence beside her was a shield, an unspoken promise that the fight was no longer hers alone. The newcomer's eyes met hers briefly, conveying something deeper than words could express: solidarity, protection, and a history intertwined with silent battles fought far from this place. The crowd's eyes flickered between Darren and the newcomer. Whispers bubbled beneath the surface, a rising tide of recognition and awe. It was not merely the physical skill on display. It was the weight of experience, the unmistakable aura of someone who had been forged by hardship and mastery. Tom stepped forward, his voice breaking the silence with quiet authority. Enough. The single word cut through the charged atmosphere like a scalpel, bringing clarity and closure. Darren, his face flushed and expression vacant, lowered his gaze. The fight had drained from him, replaced by a dawning understanding of the magnitude of his misstep. His friends exchanged uneasy looks, the earlier smugness replaced by chastened silence. The dojo remained still, the air thick with reverence. This moment wasn't about domination or humiliation. It was a reclaiming of dignity through presence, control, and profound respect. As the newcomer released Darren's arm, the room exhaled collectively. The silent lesson hung in the air. Strength tempered by discipline is the truest power of all. The dojo was cloaked in a silence so profound it felt almost sacred. The sudden shift from tension to stillness was like the quiet after a thunderclap, the kind that leaves the air charged but motionless. Darren knelt on the mat, his chest rising and falling unevenly, eyes wide with a mixture of shock and disbelief. The bravado that had filled the room moments before was now gone, evaporated under the weight of the newcomer's presence. Students and spectators exchanged glances, their breaths caught between confusion and dawning realization. Maya leaned toward Evan, her voice barely a whisper. "Did you see that?" Not a punch thrown, but he controlled Darren like a puppet master, effortlessly. Evan's gaze remained fixed on the tall man, now standing quietly beside Claire. The calm strength radiating from him was undeniable, a presence that silenced the room without a single word. The newcomer's eyes swept the dojo once more before returning to Claire, where a silent nod passed between them, heavy with history and mutual respect. In the back of the room, a young man's voice broke the fragile stillness. "Wait, that's Jackson Reyes, isn't it?" The name hung in the air, a ripple in the quiet that quickly spread like wildfire. Whispers erupted, soft but urgent. Photos and headlines. Stories of a legendary MMA champion known for his unmatched discipline and grace under fire flickered through memories. Jackson Reyes was a name spoken with reverence, an icon whose legacy was whispered about in gyms and fight circles across the country. Darren's face drained of color. The realization of whom he had challenged crashed over him like a cold wave. His friends shifted uneasily, their earlier confidence replaced by shame and disbelief. The room's energy had irrevocably changed. Tom stepped forward, his voice calm, yet authoritative, cutting through the murmurs. Jackson doesn't waste his strength on the undeserving. His gaze softened as he turned to Claire. And neither should we. Claire met Tom's eyes with a steady nod. She stood tall, not as a victim of mockery, but as a woman whose dignity was quietly restored by the presence of a legacy few could question. The atmosphere transformed. Where mockery and dismissal had once filled the air, now settled a deep respect, a recognition of strength, resilience, and history intertwined in quiet dignity. This was more than a fight. It was a reclaiming of respect, a testament to the power of presence over provocation. The weight of the moment settled gently over Griffin's dojo. The murmurs of disbelief and awe gave way to a reverent hush as Claire stood quietly, poised yet unassuming. Her shoulders were squared, her chin lifted with a quiet confidence that spoke of more than just victory. It spoke of endurance, of battles fought in silence, and strength born in humility. Her gaze swept slowly over the faces now fixed upon her. The students who had whispered and watched, the instructors who had stood by, even Darren and his friends who moments before had jeered, all now regarded her with something new. Respect, recognition, a shared understanding that she was far more than the sum of the cruel words thrown her way. Jackson Reyes remained by her side, a calm presence anchoring the moment. His steady nod was more than support, it was acknowledgement, a silent promise that the fight was never hers alone to bear. He was a living testament to the power of protection born from deep respect and shared history. Tom stepped forward, his voice low and deliberate, cutting through the silence like a measured strike. "You showed more strength standing silent than most show throwing punches," he said, eyes meeting hers with unspoken admiration. Claire's lips curved into a slight, almost imperceptible smile, a quiet acceptance rather than triumph. "Sometimes," she replied softly, "strength isn't the fight you take. It's the fight you don't." The dojo's atmosphere shifted. What had begun as a scene of humiliation transformed into a lesson in resilience, grace, and quiet dignity. The antagonist's earlier mockery dissolved into a respectful silence, replaced by reflection and newfound humility. Those who had doubted her now saw her differently, not as an easy target, but as a woman bearing invisible scars and stories that lent her an unbreakable spirit. Her calm presence spoke volumes more than words ever could. Jackson's presence was more than physical protection. It was a living symbol of the unseen battles many like Claire endured. Battles fought without applause or recognition, but no less worthy. As the dojo resumed its rhythm, the energy carried a new undercurrent, a legacy of dignity reclaimed, justice restored without spectacle. Claire gathered her belongings with deliberate care. The worn dog tag, still tucked beneath her sleeve, shimmered faintly, a quiet emblem not of war, but of survival, honor, and steadfast grace. Her steps carried her away from the mat, steady, unhurried, embodying a presence that needed no further words. The lesson remained, clear and enduring. True respect is earned not by force, but by truth and unyielding strength. The silence lingered, dense and heavy, as the reality of the moment settled in like a slow dawn. A few students shuffled, their eyes widening as they pieced together the significance of what had just transpired. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd, low murmurs that grew steadily with quiet astonishment. A young woman near the edge of the room, voice barely above a breath, spoke aloud. "That's Jackson Reyes, the MMA champion, the one who hasn't fought in years." Her words echoed like a spark, igniting the crowd's understanding. Eyes flicked toward the man standing calm and composed beside Claire. The stories once relegated to rumor and legend suddenly felt immediate, tangible. Photos flashed in memories. headlines showcasing Reyes' unyielding discipline, articles lauding his grace under pressure, and countless videos capturing his precise, controlled technique. A name that had once been spoken only in hushed tones now filled the room with undeniable presence. Darren, still on the floor, blinked rapidly, as if trying to erase the realization from his mind. His earlier arrogance was replaced by a profound understanding of the magnitude of his mistake. His friends looked away, the weight of their misjudgment settling like a shadow across their faces. Tom's voice broke the silence with quiet authority. Few get the chance to witness the strength behind the name. But today, it's been shown, not just in skill, but in the dignity that protects those who walk with it. Claire remained composed, but beneath the calm, a flicker of emotion passed through her eyes. This recognition wasn't about fame. It was about justice, about the quiet power that lies beneath the surface of those society often overlooks. The room shifted. The energy softened from confrontation to contemplation. The lesson was clear. True strength is measured not in spectacle, but in restraint, presence, and the courage to endure. Jackson Reyes' legacy wasn't just in championships or headlines. It was in moments like this, where dignity was reclaimed quietly, profoundly. The gym exhaled collectively, changed by the gravity of what had just unfolded. The chapter had turned, not with violence or spectacle, but with truth. The dojo's energy softened as the weight of the confrontation gave way to introspection. The usual clatter of training, the thuds of punches, the shuffle of feet, had been replaced by a stillness charged with something far more profound. The harsh echoes of mockery and dismissal were now distant memories, replaced by a collective reckoning. Claire stood quietly, the fabric of her GI whispering softly as she moved with deliberate grace. The slight crease between her brows was the only sign of the internal battle she carried, an unspoken history layered beneath her calm exterior. Around her, the eyes that had once glimmered with scorn now held a complex mixture of awe, regret, and respect. The transformation in perception was palpable, the room itself seeming to breathe with a newfound understanding. Tom approached her slowly, voice steady and warm. "It's easy to mistake silence for weakness," he said. "But sometimes, the greatest strength lies in knowing when not to fight." His words carried the weight of experience, resonating deeply with those within earshot. Claire met his gaze, her own voice soft but resolute. "The hardest battles aren't always the ones fought with fists," she replied. "They're the ones we carry inside, in our memories, our scars, and the quiet moments no one sees." Her words hung in the air, a gentle but powerful reminder of the unseen struggles that shape us. Darren, still seated on the mat, looked up slowly, eyes clouded with humility. I didn't know," he admitted, voice low and vulnerable. "I shouldn't have judged you, or any of this, without understanding." His confession marked a sharp contrast to the arrogance he'd worn before, revealing the human cost of ignorance. Claire offered a small, forgiving smile. "Respect isn't about winning or losing," she said quietly. "It's about honoring the journey, your own and others. It's about seeing beyond the surface." Soft conversations began to ripple through the room. The antagonists, once brash and mocking, now approached with tentative apologies, their voices hushed but sincere. The crowd's energy shifted toward reflection and growth, a collective acknowledgement that strength is born from humility. Jackson Reyes stood silently by Claire, a living symbol of the legacy she carried, not as a trophy, but as a shield forged through resilience and quiet grace. As the afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows across the dojo floor, the atmosphere was transformed, charged with hope and the promise of new beginnings. Claire gathered her belongings slowly, each movement a testament to reclaimed dignity. She walked away from the mat not with haste or triumph, but with the steady presence of someone who had reclaimed her truth. The story was never about violence or revenge. It was about transformation, about rising above, and about the quiet power found in dignity and respect. 3 months had passed since the day that shifted everything at Griffin's dojo. The tension that had once crackled through the air was replaced now by a quiet strength that resonated through the walls like a steady heartbeat. The dojo had transformed, not just in atmosphere, but in spirit. Claire stood by the entrance, her posture calm and assured. She wore a simple GI, its fabric soft from countless washes but meticulously cared for. Beneath her sleeve, the dog tag remained tucked away, catching the light just so, a small but powerful symbol of the battles she had carried long before arriving here. It was a reminder, not of pain or victory, but of survival, resilience, and unyielding grace. Around her, the rhythm of training filled the room. Fists met pads with focused determination, feet moved with purposeful steps, and breath came steady and measured. The students who had once watched her with skepticism now trained beside her with respect. Among them, Darren was different. His arrogance softened into humility, his movements deliberate as he worked to rebuild his character and skills under the watchful eyes of those who understood true strength. Jackson Reyes, now a familiar presence, moved quietly through the dojo. His instruction was patient but firm, emphasizing control, discipline, and the quiet power of restraint. He taught more than fighting. He taught how to carry oneself with honor even in the face of challenge and doubt. The dojo had become more than a place to spar. It was a sanctuary where stories of struggle and courage intertwined. It was a place where people learned not only how to fight, but how to reclaim their dignity and walk with quiet confidence. One afternoon, as the sun cast long golden beams through the windows, Claire paused at the edge of the mat. The hum of activity softened as her gaze settled on the dog tag beneath her sleeve. It was a talisman of sorts, a link to a past marked by sacrifice and endurance, and a reminder of the inner strength that defined her. Across the room, Tom caught her eye and gave a subtle nod, a shared acknowledgement of how far she had come and how much had changed. With a soft smile, Claire turned away from the mat, not with the triumphant energy of conquest, but with the peaceful certainty of one who has reclaimed her truth. The journey ahead remained, but today, dignity was restored, respect earned, and legacy honored. And in that quiet moment, it was enough. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.